Welcome to the Deep Dive. We dig into complex topics and pull out the key insights, really just to help you get informed faster. Today, we're looking at an ancient story, but one with, I think, a lot to say to us now. It's from 1 Kings chapter 17. We're focusing on this really intense experience of a nameless widow from a place called Zarephath.
Yeah, and it might seem like just an old tale, but it really digs deep into faith, into suffering, and how divine power sometimes shows up, often in ways we don't expect, right? When logic kind of fails us.
We're drawing on a couple of sources today, the family of the Widow of Zarephath trials and blessings, and a Bible study lesson on the Widow of Zarephath. Both unpack this passage.
Okay, so our goal here is to see how her story, which starts with this amazing miracle and then just pivots to tragedy, how that teaches us something about navigating our own trials and, what real trust looks like when things get tough. So let's set the scene first. The prophet Elijah gets this command from God: go to Zarephath. Now, what's striking is Zarephath wasn't Israelite territory. It was deep in Gentile land, kind of enemy territory, you could say. Exactly, about 8 miles south of Sidon. This is Jezebel's father's turf, Ethbal. It was basically Baalsville, right in the heart of Gentile territory.
Yeah.
And God sends his prophet there, not to his own people, but to a place steeped in Baal worship, and specifically to a widow. The command is, I have commanded a widow there to feed you.
Which makes you wonder, right? Did she even know? Did she get a memo?
Probably not in the way we think of it. It's more about God's sovereign plan aligning circumstances.
So Elijah gets there.
Yeah.
He finds her gathering sticks,
Yeah.
asks for water, which maybe seems reasonable. Then he asks for bread. And her answer,
Wow.
it's just heartbreaking.
It really is. She says, as the Lord your God lives, acknowledging his God. Interestingly, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug.
Just a tiny bit left.
Right. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die.
Just eat and die. You feel the complete hopelessness there. This is it, the end of the line for them.
Total rock bottom, facing starvation. And here comes this stranger asking for her very last bit of food. But Elijah, following God's instructions, tells her not to be afraid.
He says, go and do as you have said. But first, and this is the kicker,
Yeah.
first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterward, make something for yourself and your son.
The nerve. But then he gives the promise.
He does. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth.
And what gets me every time is she does it.
Incredible, isn't it?
She actually goes and does what he said, giving away her last hope basically to a stranger based on his word. That's immense faith.
It really is, and her faith is rewarded instantly. It wasn't a one-off miracle, it was daily. The flour didn't run out, the oil didn't run out.
Day after day.
For many days, the text says, she, her son, and Elijah ate. This built a real foundation of trust.
It shows God's care reaching beyond the usual boundaries, doesn't it? Absolutely. Reaching someone considered an outsider, one of Baal's most hopeless pawns, as one source puts it. It's like a little preview, a foregleam of God extending grace even to the Gentiles.
And maybe that initial provision, that daily miracle, was preparing her for something even harder.
Often the case. Building trust before the bigger test.
So she's living with this daily miracle. Flour and oil, constantly replenished, a morning by morning new mercies kind of life, and then the floor just drops out.
Yeah. After this, the text says starkly, the son of the woman became ill.
Not just ill.
No. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. He died.
So you have the symbols of life, the flour, the oil right there on the shelf, this constant reminder of God's provision.
And death in her arms, the stark reality of her son, breathless.
It's such a jarring contrast.
It really is. And that's the heart of the problem she faces, and maybe we face too. God seems both faithful and confusingly fitful, as one writer put it. He gives life, sustains life miraculously, and then life is snatched away. It seems to contradict his promise, his care.
Especially when it happens. Right after she learned to trust him, right in the middle of the miracle.
It flies in the face of everything she thought she understood. It shows that, being God's people doesn't mean you get a pass on suffering.
It raises that huge question, why? Why does God operate like this sometimes? Why follow the miracle jar with the death of her son? Does he do good just to make the hurt worse later?
These are the raw questions the story forces us to ask.
And her reaction is just pure, raw grief and confusion. He turns on Elijah.
She does. "What have you against me, O man of God?
You can hear the anguish.
You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son."
So she immediately connects the tragedy to her own past, maybe some hidden sin.
Exactly. She thinks Elijah's presence has somehow activated God's judgment against her. It's a common human reaction, isn't it? When disaster strikes, we often think, what did I do wrong? We assume suffering must be punishment.
Or that being right with God should mean immunity from pain.
Right. And imagine her state, likely a fairly new believer, just escaped Baal worship, probably carrying guilt from that past. And then this, crushing.
The story is so honest about this. It doesn't sanitize the pain or the confusion. God sustains, yes, but he also bewilders. He delights. He devastates.
It allows for that complex reality of faith.
So what does Elijah do? He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't argue theology with her in her grief.
No, his response is incredibly direct and compassionate, really.
Give me your son. Just simple, powerful action.
He takes the child, takes him upstairs to his own room, and then he turns to God. But his prayer isn't neat and tidy either. It's raw.
Yeah, he cries out, "Oh, Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn by killing her son?"
He's basically asking God, what are you doing? Is this really happening? He doesn't have the answers either.
He doesn't defend God or himself. He takes her pain, her question, directly to God.
It shows that profound faith can include honest doubt, even protest. God can handle our toughest questions.
Even Elijah, this great prophet, is just helpless. All he can do is pray.
Exactly. Shut up to prayer.
Then comes this really dramatic act. He stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again."
A simple, direct plea for the impossible. This is, as you said, the first resurrection recorded in the Bible.
He's asking God to overturn death itself. That's huge faith.
And the Lord heard him.
The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. God answers. He shows his power over the ultimate enemy, death.
Then Elijah just carries the living boy back down to his mother.
Simply says, "See, your son lives."
Can you imagine that moment? The grief, the accusation, just washed away by impossible joy.
And her response seals it. It's not just relief, it's conviction.
What does she say?
Now I know. Not just I think or I hope. Now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. It's like the miracle wasn't just the oil and flour, or even the resurrection itself. The real miracle was this confirmation of faith.
Exactly. Because when her son died, God's reliability seemed completely questionable, right? It felt like a huge hole was blown in his promises.
Was he like the pagan gods she'd left behind? Capricious, unpredictable.
But through this agonizing trial, he proved his faithfulness in a deeper way. Her faith wasn't destroyed by the crisis, it was deepened. She learned God's goodness doesn't mean no suffering.
But his power goes beyond suffering, even beyond death.
Precisely.
So, thinking about this whole arc, it drives home a tough point. Nobody gets a free pass from trials.
Yeah. No age, location, circumstance, or spiritual advancement will exempt us, as one source notes. We're often surprised by trials, aren't we?
Always, like, why me? Why now?
But this story shows they can hit even when things seem to be going right, even amidst blessings.
And particularly, it seems, when you're trying to live obediently.
That's a key insight. Both Elijah and the widow were doing what God asked. Elijah went to a dangerous place. She shared her last meal.
We were right in the center of God's will, seemingly.
Yet, boom, this horrific trial lands on them. It shatters that common idea, that misconception Philip Keller wrote about. You know, the idea that if you trust God, obey him, have faith.
Everything will just be smooth sailing from then on.
Right. That you'll somehow be exempted from the tragedy and turmoil of their times. This story says, well, no, not necessarily.
And it applies not just to general obedience, but specifically to service too, right?
Yes. Elijah was serving God as a prophet. The widow was serving God by hosting the prophet at great personal risk.
Faithful service didn't prevent the trial.
No. And sometimes maybe service even invites opposition. One source bluntly says, the devil will see to that if no one else does, because you are working against his program.
When you serve, you're going to battle, not a picnic.
A good way to put it. But the flip side, the powerful message here, especially with the resurrection, is that God's power isn't stopped by anything, not by famine.
Not even by death.
Exactly. No scourge can handcuff God's supremacy. There's no border he can't cross, no realm where his power doesn't reach.
Which is incredibly hopeful.
Immensely.
Now, you mentioned this story echoes later. Jesus actually brings it up, doesn't he?
He does. In Luke chapter 4, he's speaking in his hometown synagogue in Nazareth.
And he reminds them.
He points out that during that same famine, there were many widows in Israel. Lots of them.
But Elijah wasn't sent to any of them.
No. He was sent only to Zarephath, to this Gentile woman.
Why did Jesus bring that up? What was his point?
Ooh, it was controversial.
Yeah.
Extremely provocative. They actually tried to kill him for it right after.
Really? Why?
Because he was essentially saying, look, when God's own people Israel rejected his message, when they were unfaithful, God took his mercy, his miracles, and he gave them to outsiders, to Gentiles, like this widow, or like Naaman the Syrian, whom he also mentions.
Wow. That's a harsh message for that audience.
It was a direct challenge and a warning. Reject God's message, and the consequences are severe. Mercy might just move on. It showed God bypassing Israel, giving favor to a Gentile, removing it from them because of their unbelief. High stakes.
Okay, so let's bring this home. This ancient story, these theological insights. What do they mean for us living our lives today? First, how do we handle it when good times are followed by really bad times? When blessing seems to turn into tragedy?
That's a tough one. I think the story suggests a few things. Remember God's past faithfulness, like the widow had the daily bread. But don't presume it means immunity from future hardship.
Okay.
And bring your honest questions, even your anger, to God. Don't suppress doubt like Elijah and the widow did.
Be real with God.
Yeah. And look for his presence in the crisis rather than assuming he's left. Trust his character even when his actions are confusing.
That's hard, but crucial. Okay, second lesson. How do we respond when others are in crisis? Elijah's example is powerful here. He didn't preach.
No quick theological fixes. He didn't defend himself when she lashed out in pain. He just acted.
So for us, maybe listen more than we talk.
Definitely. Accept blame gracefully sometimes, understanding it comes from pain. Take prayer seriously. Maybe it's the first thing we do, not the last resort.
And practical care matters too, right?
Absolutely. Demonstrate love practically. And crucially, don't minimize their pain or rush them through grief. Let them feel it.
Good advice. Third point, praying in those impossible situations. What can we learn from Elijah?
His prayer was so honest, wasn't it? He didn't pretend to understand.
And persistent, stretching himself out 3 times.
Right. It combined faith, asking for the impossible, resurrection, with action and total reliance on God.
So for us, that means be honest with God about our doubts.
Yes. Keep praying even when it looks hopeless. Ask for big things, ask for the impossible, while still trusting his ultimate wisdom. God can handle our confusion. He honors that persistent, faithful asking, even for, terminal illness or broken relationships that seem beyond repair.
Okay, finally, this whole story is a masterclass in how faith can actually grow through crisis.
It really is. The widow starts with simple trust for daily bread, then faces the ultimate test, death, and emerges with this rock-solid conviction about who God is and the truth of his word.
Crisis reveals what we truly believe, doesn't it?
It strips away the superficial stuff. And those struggles, those questions, they aren't signs of weak faith. They can actually be the path to stronger faith.
Because God uses them to show us more of himself.
Exactly. Mature faith learns to hold that tension. Trust and confusion, hand in hand sometimes. The invitation is to let suffering deepen our faith, not diminish it.
So this deep dive into the Widow of Zarephath, it's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Faith and tragedy aren't opposites. They coexist in this life.
God's people will face hardship, loss, even death. But the story shows God isn't distant. He doesn't stand off from our pain.
He enters into it.
Yes, into the darkest moments with power that can transform. His power overcomes death itself. Nothing is too hard for him.
And for Christians, this points forward, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The resurrection of the widow's son is a shadow, a pointer to the greater resurrection of Jesus. And through Jesus, the hope of resurrection for all who trust in him.
So the question for us, for you listening, is when crisis hits, how will you respond? Will you be honest with God like the widow and Elijah? Bring the hard questions.
Will you trust God's goodness even when his ways seem baffling, even devastating?
The widow learned that God's faithfulness isn't about a life free from suffering.
It's about his presence and his power right there in the suffering. Her raw accusation that "what have you against me" wasn't the end of her faith. It was actually part of its forging. Radical honesty even in despair.
So what if you allowed your hardest trials, your most confusing moments, to become the very places you discover more of God's surprising grace and undeniable power in your own life?